Good evening. I'm Mary Henley, President of the Midland Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Incorporated. Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated is a private, nonprofit organization whose purpose is to provide assistance and support through established programs in the local communities throughout the world. A sisterhood of more than 200,000 predominantly African-American college-educated women. The major programs of the sorority are based upon the organization's 5-point programmatic thrust: educational development, international awareness and involvement, physical and mental health, political awareness and involvement. The Midland Alumni Chapter was chartered in 1984 and has worked tirelessly to promote the goals of the national organization in our community. Deltas and the Midland Alumni Chapter are actively implementing the goals of the sorority through a variety of programs and projects many of you might recognize. We have collaborations with partners to increase awareness of prevention in the areas of heart health, stroke, high blood pressure, and cancer. We have awarded over $100,000 in local academic scholarships to high school seniors. We actively participate in voter registration drives and public forums regarding social issues, cultural enrichment for families and children, and many of you may know our science and math enrichment programs, now titled STREAM. At present, the chapter has 20 active members, and we are excited about our work in the Midland community. So we look forward to conversations with the Deltas this evening. The way these conversations, they resonate with me, because we're talking about the book, Disintegration of Black America. Personally, because of my family history, we moved north from Mississippi in the mid-1960s to Flint, Michigan as a part of the 60s migration north. So this is definitely my history. My father worked for GM for 40 years in the automotive industry. And so we were some of the first Blacks to actually move into a predominantly white neighborhood. And then we watched as the neighborhoods changed and neighbors moved out one by one. So this discussion is very real for me because I'm one of 6 children. And I also fall into the category of being raised by a single divorced mother. So now a part of the poor living on the system. So I valued education in a real way as a way out of the traditional path. And I was a good student at a time when schools were still integrated and had AP courses in Flint. And I applied and was accepted into Central Michigan University. And that is how I became one of the first in my family to go to college, value education, and then spend a lifetime in a career making sure that students are able to gain the education they need in order to be productive members of society and to have productive lives and be able to, take care of their families. So I'm excited about our time here this evening, and I hope that you enjoy, and I look forward to speaking with you all again at the end of our forum today. So thank you and enjoy.
Thank you very much for that welcome, Mary. We appreciate it. And thank everyone for joining again. So Community Conversations with the Deltas is a thoughtful exploration of the challenges facing the African American community as we strive toward the universal goal of achieving an anti-racist society. The purpose of the event is to provide a platform for community conversations, in this time using the book Disintegration, The Splintering of Black America, by Pulitzer Prize winner Eugene Robinson. This 2-part series will use experiences of African Americans and community partners to explore opportunities and challenges in our service area. Participants will leave with ideas for how to personally commit to improving racial and social equity in our community. The book presents America's African American and African heritage population as now divided into 4 distinct groups: the abandoned poor, immigrants and people of mixed race, the mainstream middle class, and the small but powerful transcendent elite. Think Barack Obama, Oprah Winfrey, Michael Jordan. While the book was initially published in 2010, and one could argue there has been further splintering from those initial groups, we believe the foundational concepts in the book are still relevant as we look at our Midland community today, the opportunities and challenges we've already experienced and still face. Today, we are focused on learning about the community organizations leading the change on social and racial equity and how we as individuals can support them and others to take action. You will have the opportunity to engage in the conversation by using the Q&A feature on this call to post questions to our panel. Some questions may be picked up during the discussion in the panel, but most will likely be reserved for the Q&A portion of our agenda toward the end of the event. This is a community forum that celebrates the respectful flow of ideas and concepts, and we thank you for your support in that. In the event we experience a digital disruption that ends the forum, we will try to reconnect after a few minutes. If we're not successful, we'll simply share next steps via our chapter website, www.midlandmidst.org, and Facebook page for a follow-up event date. So let's begin the discussion. We are very excited to have our panelists join us today, and we're going to ask Diane Willem-Brown to kick us off in the introductions. Diane, please.
Lisa, thank you for the introductions, and thank you to the Midland Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta for hosting the community conversations. I'm Diane Brown Wilhelm. I've lived in Midland for 37 years. In June, it'll be 38 years. I sit on the Midland City Council. I'm the councilman for Ward 4, and I'm also the legislative director for the city of Midland. Fun fact I'd like to share with everybody that I don't think everybody's aware of, but when you sit on city council, you're nonpartisan because we have to work with everyone in the community, and we have to work with everyone who's in some type of office that's supporting our community. So, and if you ever have any questions, reach out.
That's wonderful, Diane. Thank you so much. I believe next we have Daryl. And Daryl, please turn on your camera if you don't mind. Thank you.
Good evening, and thank you all. And first, let me thank the Delta Sigma Theta alums for having me sit in on this conversation because it's a virtual who's who, and the work that you all are doing is spectacular. And I just want to say, keep it up. I am Daryl Newton. I actually, too, like Diane, was one that migrated to the north during those mid-60s when my father came this way for jobs and just empowerment and a better life, because I'm original born in Louisiana, Coshada, Louisiana. So if you Google that, you'll know this book means a lot to me, coming from Coshada, Louisiana, and obtained my education at Michigan State University, where I received 3 degrees, a master's and 2 bachelors. Have about 26 years of solid experience, from integrated marketing to education to sales and service and customer service. And now, as of late, I have, just because of the state of things, have been the president of the local NAACP chapter of Bay City for the past 8 years, but have been involved for pretty much a lifetime because of my father and all, as coming from the South, getting involved. And I'm just delighted to be here and to join in on the conversation.
Great, Daryl, thank you so much for that introduction. We will move on to Tiffany. Tiffany, please turn on your camera. There we are. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks, Delta Sigma Theta, Midland Alumni Chapter, for this invitation. And as I shared with Lisa, I'm so excited that you guys are doing this series. very necessary in such a time as this. And like Darryl, I am a native of Louisiana, born and raised in New Orleans. I've been in Midland now 10 years. My family and I moved here from Miami, Florida, where we lived there 10 years for my husband to work for Dow. And subsequently, I am now employed 7 years with Dow Chemical. I'm an employee benefits plan manager. I have a Juris Doctorate degree. I practiced law for a number of years from Southern University in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and a Master of Laws degree from John Marshall in employee benefits. And in the community, well, fun fact, like my sister Diane, I was just at my daughter's track meet prior to this call, and a fellow parent asked me, how's it been serving on the school board? So some of you may know that I had a run for Midland Public School Board where my kids attend school here in Midland. I did not win the race, but I'm happy to say that I'm still very much involved in the kids' education in the community, which is really a part of some of the organizations where I serve, namely Alpha Kappa Alpha, Sorority Incorporated, the Alpha Omega chapter here in Midland, the Tri-City Link, and the Great Lakes Bay Region chapter of Jack and Jill of America.
Thank you so much, Tiffany. Wonderful. And we will move to Corey. Corey, thank you.
Thanks, Lisa, and thanks so much for the invitation to be here this evening. I echo the sentiment and comments from the earlier introductions. My name is Corey Valenti. I work with Dow. I've been with Dow for 10 years now. I currently lead inclusion and diversity for North America, so supporting our 17,000 employees throughout the US and Canada. Speaking of Canada, it's where I'm from, so born and raised in Toronto, moved to Chicago after that, and then Philadelphia, where I started my career with Dow, and then moved up to Midland in 2016, so crossing the 5-year threshold pretty soon here. I have a PhD in organic chemistry, so not a natural pathway towards the inclusion and diversity arena by any stretch, but as Lisa well knows, Dow's a playground for careers. And so through a series of events have sort of landed in this really rewarding, impactful, inspiring role that I'm just so thankful to be in. So looking forward to the discussion today. And again, really appreciate the invitation.
Thank you so much, Corey. And we will have Terry round us out. Terry, would you mind turning on your camera, please? Thank you so much. And unmuting yourself, Terry. Yep. Yeah, there you go.
Well, hi. Well, thank you all so much for having me. I am just thrilled to be here this evening and appreciate the opportunity here at the center to partner with the Deltas on this event. And these events and these forums has been amazing. I have appreciated the opportunity. I've been in Midland now for just over 5 years and have gotten to know a lot of the ladies, some of the Deltas, and have really appreciated the warm welcome that I have received. So I'm feeling very at home in this forum. So very excited about that. I don't know, Diane had a fun fact. I think my fun fact is y'all migrated from the south to the north, and I went the other way. So I was born and raised in the Midwest, but my family and me eventually moved to Arkansas. And that's where my kids were born, and that's where my family now lives. So I've come back up north, but have now my family roots in Arkansas as well. So lots of Southern roots going on here. But I have been with the center now for 5.5 years. I came actually from Sun Valley, Idaho, where I had been for just a couple of years. It ended up being a pretty short stint because Midland came calling. So, and then before that was in Fayetteville, Arkansas. Just again, really excited to be here and appreciate this conversation and the invitation to be part of it.
Thank you so much for joining us, Terry. And so tonight we will co-facilitate this discussion. Myself, my name is Lisa Williams. I'm a member of the Midland Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. And my fellow chapter member, Dr. Nikita Murray. Nikita, would you like to introduce yourself?
Just very briefly, so we can get to the good part and the dialogue that we're going to have. I am a 30-year resident of Midland and a 16-year member of the Midland Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. I've had the opportunity to work with many great people in this community, some of them on this discussion with us and joining in this dialogue. And my life has always been around diversity, equity, and inclusion. My fun fact is, I actually came to Midland to work as a sports reporter for the Midland Daily News, and that in and of itself is both an equity and an inclusion example. Currently, I am the director for the Office of Diversity Education at Central Michigan University. So with that said, I'm going to throw it back to Lisa so we can get to the panel.
Get it going, yes. And so I'm checking out the chat here, and as we've already mentioned, the purpose of forum number 2 has 2 parts. One, to expose the organizations already doing this great work, and 2, offering a platform for individuals to personally commit. And so I see people introducing themselves and their organizations in the chat. That is exactly what we want you to do. So please chat about who you are and your organization. We are going to save all this information. And thank you so much for joining today. So we will start with our first question, which is actually an opportunity for each of our panelists, and we can go in a similar order or whoever feels the spirit first. The first question is, how is your organization working to promote racial equity in our community today?
Well, I'll start if it's okay.
Sure, Daryl, thank you.
Well, as we're having this conversation now, it's about engagement, because obviously the NAACP, the oldest civil rights organization in the country, started out of a necessity. But now with the state of just all of the things that are happening around us, which, you know, we don't have to mention, we see it every day. There has to be that discussion on race and racism, so that those that may not have those same feet in those shoes can have some understanding on the 401 years of suffering and just basically what we've been going through. But to make a long story short, you have to engage. And I've been engaging with a lot of organizations such as the Noon Optimist or the Chambers or the Rotarians, which are, you know, good municipal and civic organizations, but they have a large following that may not understand the you know, the elements or the aspects that we're seeing. But it's about having that conversation and sitting at the table and getting some understanding, and maybe even asking those tough questions, because the only way you're going to get a decent answer and understanding is by asking those questions. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense.
Okay.
We can hear you. Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Daryl.
Sure.
I'll go next. So for the city of Midland, as Daryl said, there's been a lot going on. And from a city perspective, as well as Midland County, we said we wanted to be proactive and we wanted to acknowledge, you know what, it's time to have these discussions. And they aren't going to be easy. And we felt some responsibility for this because it's really city council as well as the board of commissioners that are responsible for protecting and serving the citizens within our community. And on top of that, we're the ones who put the policies and laws in place. So we felt we needed to be on the forefront of this to start having these discussions, understanding what's really happening here so that we could take the appropriate actions. We could always take action. However, if we're not taking the right ones, we're not making any change. And we want to impact the change in our community.
Thank you so much, Diane. I think we will go now over to Corey. How about we will bring you in for Insights from Dow.
Sure. No, happy to. And so we've been on a journey at Dow, right? It's a multi-decade journey, actually, dating back many decades into when we first launched our first employee resource groups. And the last session that was held, I think there was some great testimony about work Dow was doing in the 1960s as folks were migrating into the community. I'll speak more recently to some of the work that we've been doing, the stuff that I've been more involved in. Actually, with Lisa, we've been partners in crime here, and that's through our Dow ACTS framework. And so ACTS stands for Advocacy, Community, and Talent. And it was Dow's response to racial inequity and racism at large, systemic racism that we were seeing, and that was certainly highlighted through the series of events and the tragic murder of George Floyd in 2020. And so while we've been on this journey, and it's been a very intentional journey, the word I would use right now within the company is really we've been activated. And we've been activated in any number of different ways. Dow ACTS is a framework. We have a very clear set of commitments that we're being very transparent about. All of that information is available, not to put a website out there, but if you wanted to visit it to see all the work that we're doing in this space, www.dow.com/ACTS, and you can get a good flavor for all the work we're doing in this space. But whether it's our work, we've launched a brand new social justice council within our company to proactively engage on matters of social justice ahead of time, right? And so instead of being reactionary, really looking to take a proactive stance on any number of topics that typically corporations have shied away from. And so part of our commitment to get more involved and be better allies as we head forward. Dow Promise program, where we provide funds to local communities that are typically underserved. These are financial grants and partnerships that we have through Dow. A recent financial contribution as well through the U.S. Chamber of Commerce to support 25 Black-owned businesses that are really struggling right now, especially through COVID and all the disproportionate or disparities that you see in terms of sort of the impact that you have across race. We've reimagined our partnerships with HBCUs. We're being more transparent on representation, publishing all of our representation numbers externally for the first time. And so that sort of gives you a cross-section, a sort of a flavor for all the things that we're doing at the US level, I would say. More locally, we've just supported and we're getting ready to kick off here a Dow Student Mentor Academy in Saginaw that looks to pair students in the high school range with mentors within Dow. That's a 3-year program, and we're really excited to launch that this summer. And that's really targeted at training underserved student populations, like I said, through the end of 2023. And then even more recently, I think most of the folks we are in the panelist intros here, before everybody else joined, we were talking about Amy Beasley. She seems to be a connection point with a lot of us, but she's a Dow employee that worked with the Midland Public Schools for over a year. She was a full-time consultant with them to really help them on their journey around inclusion, diversity, and equity. And so I don't want to take up too much time here with this intro question, but really wanted to give you a flavor for things that we're doing both at the national and the local level, but really truly activated in a way that I've never really seen, with all the work I've done at Dow and inclusion and diversity, activated in a way I've never really seen before. So commitment is there, and looking forward to digging into some more actions as we go through the discussion today. Thanks, Lisa.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Corey. We're going to move over to Tiffany and then Terry, and then we'll have a quick poll for the audience. So Tiffany, go ahead, please. And Tiffany, I think you're muted on your side. And I'm still not quite hearing.
Can you hear me now?
Tiffany. Yes, now we've got you. Thank you.
All right. So as I was saying, the organizations where I serve, we are standing on our mission, the mission from which we were started. with the sorority. We are here to make sure we are elevating women and girls to be empowered in the world, to use their voices. With the Jack and Jill of America organization, we're a group of mothers who work with children ages 2 to 19 to provide leadership, to provide volunteer philanthropic opportunities so that they understand they have a voice. And when they go out into the world, as someone mentioned earlier, that it's okay, and it's absolutely mandatory for them to have a seat at the table, so that issues of equity they're aware of, but they know that they are equipped to serve and to lead. And definitely the same with Tri-City Links. We are working with a group of young ladies where we have followed them from middle school. They're now in Saginaw public schools in high school. We work with them, and we've actually done some collaborations. I know that's one of the later topics where we've worked with them as well as our Jack and Jill kids to understand, in light of what's happening in the world, in the nation, that here is an opportunity for you to use your voice. Here are things that you should know which are acceptable and which are not acceptable, and to learn to speak up and to advocate. Advocacy is huge right now, and having, I guess, the nation understand here are a group of people who are here and who are not going anywhere. And for me, it's like I said, with education, I feel strongly that you teach the children and then they will go out and lead.
Thank you, Tiffany. Terry?
Great. Like following Tiffany, because I think we have some similarities there in the things that we're working on. Our mission is to be a gathering place, a cultural destination where people find meaning and connection. And, that for us is all people. And so making sure that we are able to serve that mission broadly within the region is something that we're always focused on. We have a stage that a lot of people don't have. And I mean, not literally an actual stage. We get a lot of people in to see things. And so one of the very important pieces that we work on is representation, making sure that we're a place where people can see lots of different things, lots of different perspectives about things, and maybe see and learn things that they may not learn in their back at home. This is especially important for us for school children. We work to bring cultural artists from all sorts of different cultures around the world in, and really work hard to connect the schools with them, bring school kids in to see those. And we know we hear amazing stories from teachers about, particularly in our rural communities, kids that never see anybody that doesn't look like them, or have never had an experience that, promotes sort of a different kind of music or different kind of dance or different kind of speaking or whatever it is. And, if you don't experience it, then you don't know. And to Tiffany's point, making sure the kids have that experience in our community is something that we're really, really committed to moving forward. So that's a key piece of what we're doing. Also partnerships within the community like this. I mean, we partner with almost everybody here on this call, and trying to help be that connection place, and a place where you can have conversations, you can have particularly respectful conversations where we can kind of dig into subjects in a way that maybe are a little less comfortable for some. Certainly the arts give us that opportunity, right, to see and hear things that maybe it's a little bit less threatening, but we can really think about a different perspective. And so that's the way that we're really working on approaching the whole subject right now.
Thank you so much, Terry. I would agree that I've only spent about 2 years in Midland as a resident, but the Center for the Arts has certainly been a place where those forums could be held, and that additional thought expansion and thought leadership in the discussion starts to happen. So we thank you for that. We have a quick poll. So that was a wonderful warm-up, right? This is a beautiful collection of organizations in our community who are very richly already working in these spaces. And so we want to launch the poll very quickly here. and just ask the broader community a question, right? And it's sort of a know some knowledge. I believe I have knowledge of the struggles of Black America, right? And the responses could be no knowledge, some knowledge, or significant knowledge. Don't think about it too hard, just answer the poll. And we're going to capture your responses and take a look at them a little bit later in the event.
Meanwhile, while you're doing that and not thinking too hard about the poll question, we really want to build on what we've started so far around this dialogue. And I underlined, circled, wrote down, underlined, drew stars around the word activated. So I want to thank Corey for that word, because really what we'd like to see us do now is kind of shift into thinking about and talking about how can the community become activated and engage with your organizations or around organizations. And while you're thinking about it, I'll give you a really good example, because as I was listening to everyone talk, I also couldn't help but to go back to Delta Sigma Theta and thinking about the impact that it has had, not just on the Midland community, Midland proper, but Midland County and surrounding areas. Our service areas actually include a larger portion of the Great Lakes Bay region than people tend to think about. And so individually and collectively, our work benefits those families and children, people who tend to live on the margins from that perspective. And so sometimes it's not until you start talking about it that you think about, hey, yeah, we're doing quite a bit to engage people, but we want to do a better job. So putting it back out to you all, how can we get the community activated around involvement or engagement with your organization?
I'll go. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. So similar to Delta Sigma Theta, my sorority, Alpha Kappa Alpha, has had a wonderful partnership over the years with the Center for the Arts. As one example, we have had the opportunity to do Blacks in STEM, a series where the public was able to see pioneers over the years, even early Dow employees who have worked in the STEM field. We have had children in some of the various groups I'd named, as well as Midland Public School children come through and see and just kind of get some of this that they may not be getting in the classroom, this Black historical information about STEM. One of, I guess, my most fond memories is with the American Girl Fashion Show, because I was only here in town for a few months and was able to participate. So not only were we providing an opportunity to partner with the center and have young people confidently walk out on stage in front of hundreds of strangers to teach them this skill, but again, we had the opportunity to show people in Midland who may not necessarily look like the ladies in the sorority that, hey, we're a part of the community, we're here to serve, here are some things and some ways that we can collaborate and learn about each other. And so I would say if anyone has a platform or, for instance, with the young people we serve with Jack and Jill of America, if there is an opportunity to, like some of the programs you mentioned, Corey, the mentorship, the job shadowing, or either cross-cultural information. This past year, our organization celebrated Kwanzaa for the first time as a newly formed organization. But I would love for our children to also understand what it's like for someone who's celebrating Hanukkah, to learn different customs. And I think the more that we can collaborate and just kind of understand and learn the customs and learn that, hey, we're different in some ways, but we're alike in so many more. I think those are ways that community organizations can work with some of the organizations that I serve.
And I would piggyback on that and say, you know, the idea of partnership and kind of getting together. If you know, if you have ideas, if there, you know, Tiffy talked about reaching out, and I know, you know, Nikita reached out on some of these. You know, we love those opportunities to collaborate at the center. And I think also spreading the information outside of Midland as well. One of the things that we find, and I think, you know, for most of us that are in the region, Midland kind of has a brand, right? And it is not always everything that we want it to be. And in fact, sometimes kind of stuff we really don't want it to be. And as an organization that is really set up to serve our entire region and all of mid-Michigan, you know, we are constantly trying to reach out and to build relationships in communities all across the region. But, you know, I mean, I've heard stories about people not, you know, I don't know if I want to go to, you know, I don't want to go to the center because, you know, I don't know if it's a good idea to Midland, and, you know, and we get it going the other way too. And so how do we overcome that and, you know, make sure that everybody does feel welcome here? So.
And I think from a city perspective, it's going to be a little bit different from what some of the organizations are doing. But I think one of the things that we do have in common is the partnership and partnering. We've been doing that for a long time in the community, and we're going to continue. I think, and hopefully everybody was aware of the Midland Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion survey that went out. And once those results come back, I've been hearing little tricklings of things. We will be rolling that out to the city, those results. And so we're hoping everybody will participate and hear those results, because afterwards, you know what, we're going to have some more tough discussions. And when I say tough discussions, I'm going to give you an example from our We Hear You coalition. And I saw Chief Ford is actually on too. There was a discussion in one of our meetings, and it was a Black male who serves on the coalition, who also lives in Midland, and was giving his perspective of how he feels as a Black male when he's stopped by the police. And he shared his story about when you walk up to my car and you have your hand on your gun and you want me to reach over and get my driver's license and registration, I'm really feeling like I'm not sure what's going to happen and what's going to happen if I turn my head. And then at the same time, which was also an eye-opener, the chief was there and she said, well, if I can explain how, you know, our process works. She said, you know, when we walk up to a car, we don't know who's in it. We don't know who may be in the back seat. We don't know what may be laying on the seats. And she says, but we're always going to walk up with our hand on our gun. It's not to instill the fear that somebody's going to get hurt. It's because they don't know what they're walking into. And so hearing that discussion on how this Black male feels when he's stopped by the police, and then hearing the chief's explanation of, hey, here's how it works and why we do what we do. Those are the kind of conversations that we're going to have. And as a result of that, let me tell you, since then, the two that have had this discussion, I mean, it was kind of an icebreaker, because even me sitting there going, you know what, I would have never thought about all those things. I would have never thought about this is how one person feels, or this is how that police officer feels at the same time when they're both in that situation. But I can tell you since then, the people that were in this discussion actually have shared that with others in the community and brought others to the chief to have these discussions on things that they're experiencing in Midland and to be able to talk through them. So until we can get to that point, and I'm going to tell you something else too. One of the things that, you know, I've heard so far about the results is there are those that feel we have no issues in the community. we may be trying to look for issues in the community.
Mm.
And then there are others that are saying, we definitely have some issues. So there's a lot of education that needs to be done, and we need everybody to be a part of it and to be open to learn, because the only way we're going to move forward is to find that common ground, to be able to be united and to move forward together. So when we talk about, how can we work together? It's going to be to continue with the partnerships. It's going to be continuing to have those tough discussions, to really understand and to not just hear. There's a difference between hearing and listening. Hearing is a thing that can go in and out of an ear. Listening is to be able to take that data, stay fact-based, and then, be able to put it into a perspective where you can say, you know what? And Corey, I'm going to use you as an example. Let's walk together through this and figure out how we get to that next step. And until we get to that point, we aren't going to make any progress. But I can tell you we want to, and we're hoping there's a whole lot of people in our community that are going to come and step up and say, hey, we want to walk with you together and united.
Diana, maybe I'll just follow up real quick, right? Happy to partner. I think the storytelling of experiences and exposure to those experiences for people that just don't recognize them is key here, and name the time and the place, and we'll line up the DAO people that are willing to share their stories in the community, because they are real. We have had any number of listening sessions within DAO recently with senior leaders, and yeah, they've been global US-based audiences, but a lot of the sentiment comes from our Midland-based employees about their experiences here and why they choose to leave. And so, irrespective of what the survey says, if we have a subset of the population that does not feel welcome here, we have to have that honest conversation, and we have to do something about it. But in terms of what DAO is doing in the community and how people can continue to partner with us, I mean, you see the DAO logo all over. We sponsor events and support events and host events throughout the community. Let us know where we're falling short. Talk to somebody that you know at DAO. I'm always amazed at how great the network is within the company and how fast ideas can sort of propagate through that network and reach the right people. Let us know where we're falling short. We identified recently through a first pass initiative over 80 organizations, programs, initiatives, or activities in the Great Lakes Bay region linked to inclusion and diversity in some way. And so with 81, sort of how do we start prioritizing our time, and are we meeting the needs of the entire community? We're not partners with all 81, certainly, but where are we falling short? Let us know, because the intentions within the company are very real. We want to make sure that we're plugging into the right spaces where we're going to have the most impact, and where we're not doing that, we need to know.
I'm going to follow that up with.
Can I chime in on that?
Oh, go ahead, please.
Corey said two key things which I've written down: exposure and experience. And where we're at right now in the state of things, we need an all hands on deck approach to it, whether it be civic individuals, your corporate partners, just everybody from the school systems to the local government, in order to attack this issue. Far as the NAACP is concerned, the youth are our most important asset right now for the future. Education, employment, housing, social justice, and all those things fall into what needs to be done in pretty much every community in this country. And we can't do it by ourselves. We do get a lot of partners that start out well and with good intention, and forgive me for being brash with this, but at the end of the day, it tends to fall off, or this isn't something that is going to get you the warm and fuzzy, PR and the things that are really beneficial to any of the groups. But we have people that are living in poverty, and we need to build bridges and ladders to get them out of that. And when you have an organization or something that has those resources, you don't have to start grand, but start somewhere to make that approach to whether it be a mentoring program. But some folks aren't cut out for one particular type of mentoring program, which we talked about in STEM and some other things. What about building trades or something that can pique their interest, that will give them some sustainable trade or opportunity to look for? And that's what I've been looking at for our organization, getting these kids involved. Even when I grew up, when I was young here as, 14, 15-year-old, there were summer jobs available that were either through the city or major organizations, whether it might be for 60 days or 45 days or 90 days, but that gave them a sense of pride to earn that money over the summer. It kept them busy. It kept them feeling confident about themselves, and you would see where that took them. And then if they could get an internship with another company or something around the area, you take one little build step at a time. And it's just something that I think we need to get back to as communities and with community partners, looking into those things, because you would be amazed at what one little summer job can do for an individual to earn something and pay for something and utilize good time. And particularly if it's with a company like Dow or Dow Corning or some of the other major city companies around, just that little summer job of cutting grass or picking up trash or just doing something to get into that routine makes a big difference. And basically what it boils down to is having the resources. We need those resources to put back into those communities, to give them that exposure and that experience, because right now, we see a lot of kids that are actually lost out there, and just, for whatever reasons, they don't have the skill set, because obviously they're having some issues at school, but everybody needs to have that opportunity, and it might change a life. It might change a lot of things. So I think when we look at, where we need to start in the community, that may be a good place to start, because everybody isn't as fortunate, but we need to build those ladders and bridges for those desperate poor, as we talked about in the book. So it makes a difference. You have to start from the bottom in order to reach the top.
I'm glad we created space for Daryl to jump back in and add that, because that was very important, and it was fitting with where I was about to go.
Comments?
Where I was about to go. In terms of, Midland is a great incubator, right? It's great for creating opportunities to develop leaders. It gives you ideas for how you can operate a nonprofit, for how you can help meet the needs of people. And yet, my new question as a follow-up to you all is, rather than thinking first about how we can engage people, is it necessary for us to first think about how we can dismantle the status quo?
Yeah, maybe if it's okay, I'll take a shot at going first, right? I think, when you think about the status quo and all the bias that exists in institutions and in everyday life, right? I think Terry said this earlier. It's representation, to me, is the name of the game, and that's the output for how you understand whether or not we're making progress. In my mind, right? It's a clear, measurable indicator that we can measure progress against. And so the reason why we don't have representation at all levels of society, and even at Dow, right? Fully transparent that we are not perfect by any stretch, but we're working to get better. But we got here by one of two ways: either there's unequal opportunity, right, which is really rooted in bias, or talent isn't distributed equally across race, gender, et cetera, right? There's a monopoly of talent by a certain population. I hope everybody agrees that the second option is not the right answer, that it really is unequal opportunities that's rooted in bias. Those are our only two options. So until we're able to recognize that as a society and as institutions and organizations, we're never going to change. And once that realization is made, we can start to take those steps towards closing gaps that we know exist, understanding biases and how that can manifest into discrimination, prejudice, microaggressions, you name it, all the downstream consequences of that bias that's built into people from a very early age. And so, long answer to say representation, but we got here because of that narrative that I just shared.
I saw Terry leaning in.
Terry leaning in too. I thought she was going to jump in.
Okay, I think I'm going to take a different
twist
go
ahead,
from a city perspective because, we talk about this quite a bit during our council meetings and different things that come before us, talking about attracting and retaining talent. We have feedback from the businesses here, core businesses, including Dow, saying, hey, here's where what we're looking for. Here's how you can help. But what's interesting is when everyone in the community doesn't have that same vision, then it's hard for us to, and I mean, we push and push and push, but then you have those that still don't support it. So, again, another area for us to partner, because to attract talent, all right, and have the diversity that we say, is on our agenda, and what we need to do to get there, it's going to take all of us. And it's going to take, again, conversations, honest, brutal conversations in the community, so that those who don't support it, we turn them into supporters. And so there again is an educational moment for them to understand how this impacts our community.
And I think, I like the way that Nikita set it up in saying, do we first have to fight this idea of status quo? Mm-hmm. Because I think the answer is yes. And that, that's a problem probably everywhere. I think it's a particularly interesting thing here for us in the upper Midwest. That's kind of, we do structure and we do systems and this is how we do things, right? And Midland certainly is very much that way. And, a lot of the systems that we have set up even within our own organizations are that way. We think about that a lot even with the arts in general. I mean, you think about the arts and what's traditionally represented in the arts and the way that things have always been, and what people come to expect. And so then you're managing expectations, right, that may be different from person to person. So I think identifying what are those systems that are kind of baked in, or what are those things that we think about that maybe somebody else is thinking differently, and understanding those, how we always do things in order to get to new and creative ideas, and also ways to be more inclusive. Absolutely. I think that's a huge issue all the time.
Yeah, I'd just like to piggyback on the last conversation that you had a month ago. It was Dr. Betty Jones who talked about being strategic in involvement in the community, right? So some of the first African-American employees of Dow, they went out and kind of separated themselves among the different institutions, the churches, and where they work, and played to say, I'm going to be a part of this. You're going to get to know me. You're going to get to see that I live and breathe and want and desire things for my family, my children, just like you do. I think we need to do more of that, right? So being purposeful in our interactions, in our partnerships and relationships. And then another panelist shared that the community has to want to, and systems and people in charge have to want to be inclusive. So I'm just going to take that a step further and say that now, especially in light of everything that's happened in our nation, we have to ask for it. Moreover, we have to demand that, hey, here is what is required for us to support this organization, for us to continue to be a patron at your establishment. There are just, I guess, some of the ways that have worked in the past. You have to take it a step further. Some of the actions that Dow has taken, that Corey mentioned, the HBCU initiatives, the ACT commitment. We have to work together within this system to say, I'm willing to, come and live and be a part of this Midland community, but at the same time, I have some needs, and here are some things that I expect. One of the organizations that I did not mention is my church, Midland First United Methodist Church here in downtown Main Street. At the beginning of this year, our church boldly began its sermon series with a race conversation. We actually had Dr. Valenti just kind of speak to us, and then we had different nationalities, myself included, share, hey, here are some of the things that I fear of being a resident in this community, but at the same time, I'm a member and I belong here, and I just want you to know, right? So when you have those types of conversations, I sing in the choir, so people know me, but at the same time, I want you to see me. And as I think you said, Dr. Murray, I want you to not just hear me, but to listen to what my needs are. And I think if we have those types of things, the want, the strategic interactions, I think we can definitely alleviate or begin to alleviate our dismantling, as you said, Dr. Murray.
So I'm going to follow up with maybe sort of our wrap-up question. And we all know there's so much we could unpack here. It is just the beginning, again, of the conversation and the real power of bringing all of you together as an example of how we need to continue to bring our resources together in the community. So let's shift a little bit and talk about allyship, because in several of your statements, you mentioned being purposeful, identifying the systems, addressing the systemic bias, working together. What role does allyship play in developing a strategic, long-term, impactful solution? What is the role of allyship here?
I went first last time, so I'm happy to panelists. I'm happy to jump into, but I want to give everybody else.
It's okay, Corey, go ahead. People need a few minutes to think, but go ahead.
Sure. No, so I've been a lifelong advocate for allies, and they've meant the world to me with my personal situation, right? And so I've seen the power that allies can have on an individual, both personally and professionally. And nobody walks this life alone. We all need allies. And the important thing here too is you never know when allies are going to mean something to somebody, right? You never know when that certain show of support is really going to have that highest return on sort of return on investment, if you will. Wrong terminology, but I hope people follow what I'm trying to say there. And so allies are there in these unique instances and circumstances when it's needed the most. And so it's just good to show your support, let people know that you are there to support them, and you never know when that's going to come in handy. But it's also important to recognize, and I talk a lot about this within the company, is that allyship isn't binary. It's not ally or not an ally, right? Allyship is a spectrum, it's a journey. And you have people all the way from like the prejudice bucket, which you could argue obviously is not an ally, all the way through to champions and advocates. And I always say that I never fault anybody for where they are on that spectrum, right? You are there from any number of preconditioned items, right? You, as a child, what were you exposed to? Have you ever traveled the world? Have you ever been exposed to a different culture? You can't blame people for how they were raised. What you can do, though, is once an individual understands that they're biased, you can start to blame them for not trying to change, right? And that's where I start to find fault with individuals is the folks that know that they're biased, they have a prejudice, but they don't activate to change. And so no matter where somebody is on the spectrum to change and they're stepping up to the plate and say, I want to learn, I want to do better, just assume positive intent and help people along. But it is absolutely a journey, and everybody is at a different spot.
And I think it's important too, because one, sometimes, and this is Diane talking, I'm not talking on behalf of the city now. We hear all the naysayers and everything that's going, wrong, or what we should and shouldn't do, what we should and shouldn't say. But I think we want to hear the voices of those that are also in support. And that's what we don't have enough of. We can hear about everything somebody doesn't like, and the other thing is to be able to come forward without your own agenda. That's the other thing. We have a lot of folks, that have their personal agenda of what they are trying to achieve. And in order to move forward with that support, you can't come in with your agendas. And you can't sit back and not say anything. You have to speak up. You have to use your voice. And at the same time, be open to, again, listen and listen for understanding versus hearing what you want to hear, which does not support the change that we want to be. So I'm going to ask everybody here today, to join us as we move forward, partnering with our community for the change that we know we're going to be working towards. And you know what? We want to hear the voices. You know what? And if you have a personal agenda, I'm going to ask, can you set it aside so we can do what needs to be done and do the right thing so that, everybody feels like they belong.
Absolutely.
For people who may not understand, Diane, what you mean by personal agenda, can you clarify that a little bit?
Are you going to make me do that? No.
Yeah.
I mean, okay. So when I say personal agenda, there are folks that have, you can have a plan and your own objective of what you think should be happening because maybe you've lived here for all your life and you know what? You don't want to see that change because in your eyes, everything's been just fine and you're not recognizing the other things that are happening. And until we can acknowledge and say, hey, this is happening and here's what we're going to do about it. Those are the personal agendas. Does that help?
Other comments about the role allyship plays, and even in your experiences with your organizations where you've seen allyship work well or not?
Let me jump in, Lisa. And I'm going to seem a little biased here, but I'm going to take a little privilege since this is our program. But when you talk about allyship and what that could look like, I do think about Delta Sigma Theta and its 5-point programmatic thrust, which Mary referenced to earlier. But when it's built on the idea of impacting change around critical areas, right? Education, international awareness, financial stability, political awareness. And it's that political awareness piece that I wanted to jump on because it's no surprise to anyone that we live in a very conservative community, right? That's this area. And yet it might seem as though, well, why would the Deltas be interested in political awareness in a region like this, apart from it being the mandate? But there's always some work to do. And so we discovered that the work for us is just around educating young adults about why it's important to vote and how those issues how those things that matter to them, like insurance rates, right? How that is an issue that translates into how you vote or choose not to vote. And so as a primarily African-American organization, we could just kick back and say, you know, there's not a lot of Black people around, so we don't really need to do voter registration drives all the time. But instead being strategic and looking at what those issues are and helping to make those connections for individuals. And so there are, sometimes I think we forget that we can't, the whole idea around being an ally is stepping outside of your box or outside of your group. Even when you don't see a benefit back to you. That's the whole piece. And so much of, and I can say the same about the AKAs in the communities and the alphas and, you know, all of those types of organizations, but, you know, and so there are opportunities to show up for other people, and that's what it's about. And so think of it in that way.
I really appreciate, oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Terry, and then Tiffany.
I was just going to say, I really appreciate all those. I feel like, great, I've learned a lot. I found this question very challenging to say, well, what really is, you know, allyship and, you know, how we're doing it right? And I'm looking, you know, or am I doing it right? And what does it mean if I am? So I really appreciate I appreciate all of those comments, because I guess I do think about it as, you know, both how to lift other voices that maybe are different than mine, different what I see in the community, different than what I see in the organization, you know, whatever the context is, you know, and make that kind of amplify that and make sure that those different perspectives and things are getting heard. But this is, I think, a really interesting question, and one that, you know, is a good one to continue to talk about in the community, because how do we build that? I've really appreciated, thank you all for enlightening and helping me kind of think through that issue, because I found this question sort of difficult.
It's not easy. Thank you, Terry. Tiffany, please join.
So just talking about the word allyship, working in corporate America, you typically hear it, or I typically hear it in the workspace, right? So me as a minority in corporate America, there's been a push over the years for allyship for people who may have, I guess, a higher position of leadership, if you will, to speak up for those who may not. But I'll bring it more personal to the organizations with which I work. So with Jack and Jill of America, for instance, our organization is a group of mothers. It's a membership organization. So, and it comes with a cost, right? There's a resource that's necessary. Well, the work that we do also benefits the people around us, children in our community. In my community, not everyone looks like the members of our organization. So we are, and similar to what Dr. Murray shared, we are in a position that we can share whatever resources, whatever leadership, whatever skills we're bringing with our resources to our children to benefit the children in our community. That's the work that Alpha Kappa Alpha has been doing in the Midland community since 1978. And I will also say just the opportunities to continue to speak up, if you will, for other people. It just should be a mantle that each of us have. I know for me personally, it's always been, it's one of the reasons I became an attorney. So whether you call it an ally, an advocate, it's something that I take personally and seriously, that if I have something that I believe I can share, whether it be my voice, information, whatever it is, it's my duty. It's why I'm here, to benefit someone who does not.
You know, Tiffany, you made a comment that just now that struck something with me, and actually leads us into our next poll question for the broader group. There are levels to allyship and advocacy, and those two words are not interchangeable. They actually mean something different. But there are levels to each one, and we experience those levels at different stages in our life. And so now we'd like everyone to take a look at the poll question and just quickly answer. Again, don't think about it too hard. Do you consider yourself an ally for racial equity today? Yes, no, sometimes, or I don't know. Maybe allyship is a new concept, and it's something maybe you're committing to learn more about, but just whatever you feel first.
Can I add
And
a
we
comment
appreciate
while you're
you participating. Sure, yes, Diane, please.
I was going to say the other thing about allyship, and as part of the work we're doing, we work closely with the Cultural Awareness Coalition, and it made me think about, you know, allyship, you know, speaking up not only for those that are for some reason not using their own voice, but I see that as a pathway to what my friend Gina Wilson calls co-construction, which is when everybody is invested, is sitting at the table and has a voice. We're on the way there, but we haven't made it yet.
But this is the kind of forum where that galvanizes, right?
Exactly.
And that is really the message we want to drive home tonight. So we're going to, this has been a wonderful discussion, but we are going to move to wrap up our official panel and go into the last few bits of information that we wanted to share with you. One last question for the panel and a bit of a lightning round. And someone asked, you know, what are the SMART goals that your organization implements to assure you are making meaningful, measurable, systemic change? And so, you know, very quickly, a few of you could give examples of how are you measuring the change you are trying to impart in the community?
Okay, so I'll go quickly. So as we get our survey results back and we have our action plan in place, there will be a dashboard out on the various websites throughout the city showing, hey, here's the baseline of where we're starting. Here's where we want to be 5 years from now, and charting how we're doing along that path. So that will be available.
From a DAO side, I would summarize it into three things in terms of what we're doing to really do change, right? And I think the first one comes down to accountability. Are we holding our leaders and our employees accountable for DAO's values and our cultural attributes? So that's one. Transparency is absolutely key. You have to be transparent with what you're doing, how you are changing the game, so to speak. And sharing that information externally and internally so that all of our stakeholders throughout, you know, all the value chain that DAO interacts with is aware of the progress that we're making. And then the third is around intention. Are you doing this for the right reasons, or are you doing this to look good? And if you're doing this to look good, people are gonna smell that out pretty quickly, and you're gonna lose a ton of credibility. And so accountability, transparency, and intention are the three for any organization, in my estimation, to focus in on.
Thanks, Corey. Terry, please, yes.
Yeah, we're putting metrics in place that we're measuring. We're still working on some of them, but, I talked about, I think, representation in our programming is really important, making sure that we have things for everybody. So looking at what types of programs are represented on our stage, but then also not just what's represented, but what's the origin of the work? Are we looking at artists of color who are creating work? So a broad spectrum of measuring these things. How many is it? Where are we trying to get? So that, again, Corey said the accountability word. How do we hold ourselves accountable for that and know what we're what we're trying to hit and make sure that we think that represents our community.
So for the organizations, I work with a lot of young people. So for me to see the growth over the years, from young people who are afraid to speak just among their small group of peers to those who are leading conversations when we have political figures come on and they can talk and lead and ask questions. And within the community we serve, when we hear that those, ladies in the pink and green provided meals for us at the beginning of the pandemic, we went and took over gift cards to Mid-Michigan first line medical workers. So I think I'm in a seat of privilege that I get to see the results in the people that we serve. And most core of the organizations that I'm a part of is service. That's at the heart of what we do. So when I get to see the results look me in the face, or I meet someone and they say thank you, we appreciate that meal or that Christmas, those Christmas gifts you gave to my kids when they didn't have any. That is how we measure what we're doing.
Thank you, Tiffany. So everyone, again, we can't thank you enough for your participation tonight. We knew that this would be an incredible conversation, and we didn't even scratch the surface, but I think we certainly set up some wonderful momentum. There's just been some wonderful chatter going on in the chat area. I hope people have been taking a look. One of the last comments that came in was something we wanted to share. If a marginalized friend wants to call me an ally, I would be honored, but I would not presume to call myself that, an ally. And it's a matter of perspective, of acknowledgement, of learning. Allyship and advocacy happens in layers at many levels. And as you even go through your own seasons of your life, you will experience it differently. You will feel differently about it. I think the message tonight is that we are all being called in this moment in a very unique and pressing way to respond to it and take action. So as we move into closing our event, it's amazing that we've already been here almost 90 minutes. We have one more poll question that we want to pop up on the screen. And it's actually the first poll question you had when we first joined. And it's the question, I believe I have knowledge of the struggles of Black America. And again, we want you to answer just first thing that comes into your mind. But we want to see if over the course of this very short discussion, if there was some change. And so we'll take a moment to allow that poll to occur, and we're going to ask our technology team to summarize it very quickly for us as I talk through a little bit of our close toward the event, and then Mary will come back and officially close the event. So we would like to share a few other resources with all of you. As you can imagine, this conversation will absolutely continue. While this concludes our event for the night, the conversation will continue. We've provided, as a part of this series and this program, a number of resources to supplement exploration of the book and the ideas and the topics we've discussed today. Again, we've made the book accessible through the Midland Public Library, as well as a couple of other suppliers. The book discussion guide that is also located on our website. All of these resources are located on our website. Our visit to the Joyce Harvin Community Conversation Show, the podcast, which we are very happy to share with you all that they will continue past the original 4 episodes planned, because we have so many more of you to engage and tell your stories in this event. So we will continue those podcasts. Obviously, the recordings of Forum 1 and 2, And in addition for tonight, so as we commit as Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated to meaningfully continuing the conversation with this community, we are providing ourselves as a resource to the community. And I believe we have a couple of slides to show, one, that we are providing ourselves as members of the chapter and some of our experience areas in the community to you all. So you can visit our website at www.midlandmidst.org, as well as we have provided a community statement. And so we're hoping after this evening, and you reflect and you think about what you've learned, what you've experienced, and your personal commitment to this fight. I personally commit to actively work toward racial equity in my community. This is my community and my home where I and my family build our lives and support our neighbors. And I commit to racial equity by whatever is moving in your spirit right now. So like the other resources we've shared, this will be available on our chapter website for you to go and print off and really think about how you'd like to personally commit and maybe share it with people in your circles so that you not only commit to yourself, but to them, both as a way to hold yourself accountable, but also in an attempt to share your story and seek further allyship. So with this, and as well as I believe on the next slide, we are highlighting the members of our chapter who are offering ourselves to continue the conversation with you in the community. So as you can see, we have people here who identify with experience in parenting and well-being, education equity, community college diversity, equity and diversity, employment law advice and counseling, education, trauma and anti-racism, and corporate advocacy. Whether you're wanting us to come to a meeting, one-on-one sessions, perhaps participate in one of your events or one of your panels, please do feel free to reach out to us. If you want to have that courageous conversation, it might be a little difficult or you're unsure of how to get started, we are absolutely opening ourselves and our organization to making you feel like you have a safe space to start those conversations with us. So if we could go back very quickly, we'll go ahead and take a look at the poll. And it's interesting, so I believe between the first time we took the poll and the second time we took the poll, I see that we've got the results on the screen. We have some knowledge and significant knowledge, okay? So significant knowledge at 72%, some knowledge at 28%. This was the first poll, I believe. And so with the second poll, let's see if we saw a little bit of, there was a little bit of difference there. So maybe one person was sort of, I thought I knew something, but maybe not so much. But that's okay, because that's the purpose of events like this. It's all about knowledge and education sharing and community building. Absolutely. So again, we want to encourage you to visit our site at www.midlandmidst.org in the upcoming events area for all the resources associated with this event, and encourage you to continue to visit with us on Facebook and wait and see our future podcasts that will come in the future. So again, thank you to the panelists, and Mary, we will transition to you for the official close of the event.
Thank you so much, Lisa. You know, it was really tough sitting back, and I'm hearing all these great answers and I'm cheering on the panelists. So that's why they took down my camera, because they knew I would be going, yes, that's really good information. So I'm really excited. I love the wrap-up question when we asked about allyship, and all of your answers about why it's important, all of the advice regarding, setting aside personal agendas, listening for understanding, and then also partnering for change. So I want to thank our panelists, because you gave us some really good information and a really good point to start. I want to thank the Midland Center for the Arts and Katie for the technology support. I would like to thank the Midland Area Community Foundation and the Cultural Awareness Committee for content development and consultation. And then I also want to encourage people to review the resources at the chapter website. I think they've dropped that into the chat. and engage our chapter to continue the conversation. So thank you all again for joining us this evening, and have a wonderful rest of your evening.